We're starting with the most basic form of hand building, the pinch pot. Below I have some examples of tea bowls that were created out of the pinch pot method. And what you're going to need to start out is a ball of clay that's previously been wedged. So I have my clay, and I'm going to begin by packing it into a sphere. To do that, I'm using kind of the heel of my hand to apply pressure. And I want to avoid creating folds in the clay. You don't want to trap air. And I want this to be about the size of a tennis ball. You can make them smaller later, but to start, a tennis ball is a really good size to work with. It fits inside your hand. And I'm just going to pack this until it's a nice round sphere or a ball of clay. The better the sphere is when you start out, the easier it is to create the pinch pot.
Now that I have my nice round sphere, I'm going to open it up by pressing my thumb into the center of the clay. And I'm going about 3/4 of the way down. You can't see this, but I pressed my thumb in there about 3/4 of the way down. So I'm getting to about here on the clay. And I'm going to begin pinching like this, a pinching motion inside the clay. I want to keep my fingers together. You want to avoid creating finger marks on the clay, so I'm using them as a unified object. And gradually opening up that hole on the clay. It's important to make sure that your clay and your hands are hydrated, otherwise they'll begin stealing water from one another. So I'm going to set this down with the opening down so that I don't destroy my shape. And I'm just going to dip my hands in a little bit of water. You can spray the clay down with a spray bottle, but I just want to make sure that my hands are hydrated. You don't want the clay to be too wet, or it'll begin sticking to your hands and be very tacky, but you don't want it to dry out on you. So I'm just gradually pinching. I don't want to pinch too hard. I'm going to show you again. The opening is gradually getting bigger, and I'm keeping a nice U shape on the pinch pot. If I do this too quickly, the walls can become uneven. So I'm just pinching with my dominant hand, with my thumb inside and the fingers on the outside. As I continue, the clay begins to shoot upward. The pinch pot is getting a little bit taller. It is still kind of thick on the bottom, so you may want to thin that out. To do that, I can't really push my thumb in all the way, it's too short, so I'm going to reach in with my fingers, and again, using them together, I'm pressing my fingers down against the base of my left hand. So my right fingers are pressing down and working with the base of my left hand as I turn the piece. And to check the thickness, I can reach with my fingers inside, my thumb is inside, and my middle finger on the outside, and pull up gradually on the piece, and it's pretty even until I get to the top. It's a little bit thicker at the top. And I'm leaving it like that for right now because most people have a tendency to pinch the top too thin, to work too hard on the top, so I'm going to leave it a little bit thicker until the end. So I'm still gradually thinning this piece out. And again, I'll check my base to make sure that it's thinned out too. And you can see that the outside may look a little bit mashed potato-y right now, but we can fix that later. We're just working on getting a nice even consistency all the way around the piece. So again, I can do that check up the side, and it's a pretty good thickness. My fingers aren't really moving, they're just pulling up the side like that. And I'm going to thin out the top now, because I think I'm to the thickness that I want to be. So I'm thinning out the top. And as I do that, you see that it's opening up a little bit more. Right now the top is kind of curved in. But it's opening up to the outside a little bit more. And know that your pinch pot is going to be slightly bigger right now than it will be. The clay shrinks about between 12 to 14% when it goes through the drying and firing process. So your pinch pot or your tea bowl, you want to make it slightly larger than you intend on it being in the end. And for the thickness of the walls, it's kind of up to you, but I wouldn't go any thicker than the thickness of your pinky. Otherwise, if you were to use this as a cup to drink out of, it would be too thick to hold to your lips. You don't want to have a really wide edge to the cup as it meets your mouth. So again, I'm going to do that check, pulling from the bottom all the way up to the side, and my fingers are staying the same thickness all the way through. I can also do that around the pot to make sure that it's the same thickness all the way around. Notice that I haven't set the pot down at all on the table. If I do set it down, I'm going to set it with the opening down on the surface so that I can retain this nice dome shape. So we're going to thin it out a tiny bit more. And if you plan on adding texture or doing some carvings into your clay after it's dried out to leather hard, like this piece right here, there are some circles on the outside of it, you may want the clay to be a little bit thicker because you're going to do that carving. You don't want to puncture through the
set my tea bowl on a round bat with a piece of newspaper so that it doesn't stick to the bat. And I'm going to set it upside down with the opening down. This provides the most support for the piece. It won't collapse this way. If I were to set it upside down like that, you'll come in and it will have a flat bottom. I'm going to leave it like this, wrapped in a plastic bag. I'll spray the bag down overnight. And you want it to dry out to be a nice leather hard. You should have your initials on the bottom and the hour. And we're gonna end up covering that up with a foot. All these tea bowls have a nice little foot. There are different methods that I'll show you later to create a foot. But for now, you want to easily be able to identify your tea bowl. They're all gonna look very similar. You can also write your name on the sheet of newspaper, an hour, so that it's clear whose tea bowl belongs to who. And I did make my tea bowl a little bit larger than you need to. It's just easier in the beginning to practice with a tennis ball sized piece of clay. But if you would like your tea bowl to be smaller or thinner, that's fine too. And just work with a little bit less clay to begin with. But remember, there is that shrinkage factor of 12 to 14%. So your piece is going to be 12 to 14% smaller than it started out. Now that my piece has dried overnight to leather hard, I'm going to get rid of some of that mashed potato-y texture on the side. If your piece isn't quite leather hard because you sprayed your bag down so well, you can blow dry it to get it there. So to shape my piece, I'm using a ruler. If you're using one of these green rulers, they have some lines on the back side. You want to make sure that you're using the front side with the numbers so you don't get those lines in your piece. Supporting the inside, I can paddle my clay. And that's kind of getting out some of those mashed potato-y lumps and the texture out of it. Creating a nice smooth surface. This also thins your clay out a little bit, so that's why it's kind of important to make it slightly thicker in the beginning. If you have nail marks like that, I can just use the back of my nail, smooth them out, and then use my paddle. So I'm doing this all the way around. You'll notice I stop every once in a while, set my ruler down, and turn the clay. And I can even do it on the bottom of the clay. You may want to check and make sure that that edge is still nice and round. During this step, I can paddle it into different shapes, like this one if I'd like. So this one, I would have just paddled like that to create the edges. I can also cut the top to create maybe a wavy edge on the top. And once I've paddled it to the desired smoothness and shape, I can then apply texture and design to my piece. You want to make sure that it's a leather hard. Right now it's a little bit soft to add that design. It should be more of a waxy leather hard, kind of like the surface of a pumpkin. So it has that waxy surface. Your piece should have that surface as well, and then you can do your texture and design. And then I'll show you how to attach a foot after that. But first I want to cut a cross section of this to show you the thickness. Now I'm going to show you a cross section of the clay. I'm going to end up cutting it in half to show you how even the walls are all the way through. I asked you before to check by pulling your hand vertically up the piece and making sure that the distance between your finger and thumb doesn't change. So I'm going to take my wire clay cutters and just pull them through the piece. And when I get to the end, I can just lift the clay up. And this will cut your piece into 2 halves. Okay, so now that I've cut it in half, you can see the nice U shape that I've created. It's nice and even from the bottom all the way up the side, a nice even thickness. And what you don't want to see is a flattened out base like this, or any edges that are pinched too thin in some spots and then thicker in others. The most common mistake is that the clay will be very thick at the bottom. Right down here, it'll be a lot thicker and then thin out as it comes up. So you're looking for that nice even consistency like this. If I lay my pinky on there, it's about the thickness of the width of my pinky. Okay, and you obviously don't want to do this to your final product, but you can do this while you're practicing to check your pieces to make sure that what you're feeling when you feel up the side of your piece is actually what it looks like on the inside. So you're looking for that nice even U shape, just like this. Here are the different types of feet that you can have. This is a coil, so a thin slip piece of clay has been rolled out and a ring has been created to attach a coil foot to the base. You can do ball feet or cube feet, and that's where a ball of clay is rolled out and then attached to the base of the foot. It can be pinched into a square as well. And then slab feet, this is kind of like the coil where a flat piece of clay is rolled out and then joined to the bottom, but it doesn't go all the way around. There's 3 distinct feet here. And then you can also do a pinch foot. So this is a little bit taller than the coil. It makes the piece sit up higher when it's on the table. And you use the same method that you've used for creating the pinch pot, and you score and slip that onto the base. So now that my piece has dried out overnight, I'm going to show you how to join the coils or slab feet. So to make a coil foot, I'm going to roll out a piece of clay. I'm using both hands to roll this out. You can watch the coil demo if you want to learn how to make a coil. And I'm going to set this on the bottom of my piece just to check for size right now. You want your foot to be proportionate to the size of your coil or your pinch pot. So, and you don't want the bottom of the pinch pot to stick out through the feet. So this would be a good size coil. And to cut it down, I would remove it from my pinch pot. I can use a fettling knife or a needle tool, and where it overlaps, I'm going to cut on a diagonal through the clay. Make sure to get rid of the excess. And then these sides should join together. So to join 2 pieces of clay, or the ends of this coil, I'm going to score and slip. Scoring and slipping is like adding a little bit of glue to some Velcro. So I'm going to mark up my clay where it's going to attach. This is like the Velcro. And then I'm going to use a little bit of slip. It comes in a container like this. I pre-mixed it for you guys. It's just watered down clay. And I'm going to just apply it to one edge of the clay and then join my edges up, and I've cut them on a diagonal so it creates more surface. And to join them, I'm going to pinch together. I'm compressing the clay but trying to retain its shape. And then I'm going to blend the edges together so you can't tell that I've joined them right here. So smoothing it out to create a nice unified ring, just like this. Then I'm going to set this back on my pinch pot. And I can use my needle tool to mark where this is going to go. So I've created a nice line on the pinch pot. And I'm not going to do this right away because I'm going to show you how to apply other types of feet, but I could score and slip along this line and then come back over and create score marks on my ring and apply slip to either end of the clay and attach it to my T-bowl. Another method we had talked about was the ball feet. So to create ball feet, I'm going to roll out a coil again, and then cut some sections of clay. The reason we're rolling out the coil to cut the sections of clay is to make sure that I have even amounts of clay in each foot that I'm creating. So I have 4 of them right there. And now that they're all the same size, they will turn into equal-sized ball feet. So I'm going to roll the ball feet in my hands. You want to make sure that your hands are moist. Mine are kind of drying out. So I'm going to roll all 4 of these out in my hands. If I wanted to make them square feet, I could roll a ball and then pinch the feet into a square, like that. So I'm pinching just like this. I'm using my fingers and pinching together, both sets of my thumb and first fingers to pinch out a square. Okay, so you can see they're all about the same size, and I would set these on across from one another. Obviously, you wouldn't be using squares and circle feet. You just want to check and make sure they fit on the piece. And I could again mark with my needle tool where I'm placing those, where I'll need to score and slip. And then I could pick up the feet, and I'm going to score the feet, score the piece, and apply some slip. And to attach it to the piece, you're going to want to apply some pressure and twist it a little bit. Give it some twist so that the grooves in the clay that I've created through scoring are going to come together. You can use the back of your finger or a wooden tool to blend the ball feet into your piece. Pause. Or use the wooden tool to blend that edge. I can also blend out any lines that I've created by nicking my fingers against it. Those were where I was marking the feet. You wouldn't want to do that until you have all the feet attached. But I'm just trying to show you how to blend that foot in. And once it's blended all the way around, it should be attached really well. If I go to pick it off, I end up breaking the foot. The bond is so strong that I'm breaking the foot off, and you can't see my scoring. So you would do that to all of the feet that you want to attach. I can also make slab feet by taking a flattened piece of clay. I've just pressed this in my hands to flatten it out. And I'm going to cut using a fettling knife, a nice straight line. And you can make as many as you'd like. I'm going to try it with 2 for right now. down a little bit, it's a little too big. You want them to be the same size. And I can bend these slab pieces, trying to retain the rectangle shape. You might need to pinch them a little bit thinner or cut them down more if they're too tall. I think these are a little bit too tall, but it depends on the look you're going for. And your pinch pot could have feet that hold it up like that. You don't want to set this down right now. That clay is too wet to hold up. So again, I would mark where I'm putting these feet using my needle tool, and then score and slip. So I'm going to score along that line, making sure that your grooves aren't too deep. And then score the bottom of my foot. Attach a little slip, and normally I put the slip on the piece that is the driest. So because my pinch pot was sitting out overnight, that's drier than the feet that I've just created right now. And I'm going to compress this. I'm kind of pinching the walls so that I don't thicken it up too much as I press, like pull down towards the clay. And again, I can use my wooden tool or the back of my finger to blend that edge in. You want to create a nice smooth edge. If you don't blend it, they tend to break off right here or create a groove that can be kind of sharp or trap the glaze. So you want to blend it out. If you notice that it's dented in, you can roll a small coil out and set it along that edge. And I'm just gonna blend that coil. This is called a reinforcement coil. Blend that reinforcement coil in, and it will make a nice smooth transition from the foot to the base of the pot. I can always smooth this out with my finger after. Usually I find that my hands work a little bit better than any tool. So once I have that foot completely blended in to the base, it's nice and attached. You might want to wiggle it a little bit. It shouldn't move away from the base of the T-bowl. And I can reinforce its shape. I'm going to score and slip the other foot on. And blend this one as well. Creating a really thin reinforcement coil for that outside edge again. Blending it in. Okay, and once they're blended and smoothed out, I'm going to hold it the right way up and just gently, I'm not going to let it use all of the weight to press down. I'm going to gently tap it on the table, and this is just going to level the feet out. Make sure that the top is level while you're doing this. Again, I don't want to completely let go of the piece and let it sit on its own on the table. It will cave under its own weight since those feet are pretty wet right now. So just tap them down to get a nice flat bottom that's level. And then I'm going to store it until it's dry, upside down like this. You also want to make sure that your first initial and last name and hour are on the bottom of your piece somewhere. Usually in the middle of the foot would be a good place to put it right there.